Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Ellie Scott. I am the events coordinator here at Explore Booksellers, and I just want to welcome you all to the storied history of Explore. This is going to be a great event. We're joined today by Bill Sterling, who was married to Catherine for many years and has probably the longest history with Explore of any of us. And then Margaret Durney, who is our current buyer, has been the buyer at the bookstore for many years as well. And what is it, 14 years?
No, what?
Something.
Yeah, long time.
And then also Mark Billingsley, who is our lead bookseller and has also been here for something around 17 years. So, and with that, I'm going to open the event and introduce Margaret Durney.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here and to get to do what I do for the community of choosing the inventory that Explore has. I am eternally grateful to Catherine Thalberg. She advertised in a publishing magazine in like 1979, and I sent her my resume, and I was her first classical record buyer, and it was I still remember the first moment I walked through the front door. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the weather, and I remember that my life was, as soon as I opened the door and heard the jingle bells on the door, because she always had those, that my life was going to change. And I was very young and terrified, but I'm still here. Some people called the Schoenbergs owned the building from 1892 to 1899. I was asking Bill, because I thought that there'd never been a wedding at Explore. I always thought that would be a cool place to get married. I've never been married. I'm still hoping to be in that loop, maybe. You never know. But Bill actually told me he had married somebody here, because he could do that. But I found this article about this wedding. He can do it all. 6 o'clock Sunday evening, the home of Mr. and Mrs. Schoenberg, 221 East Main Street, was thrown open, and the invited guests, some 50 in number, assembled to witness the marriage of Miss Adeline Schoenberg to Mr. Morris Rosenberg. A large number of telegrams from friends away from town were received and read, and after those present had congratulated the newly wedded couple and wished them a long life of happiness, the crowd sought their respective homes. The following presents were received. It's so lovely. A picture from Mr. and Mrs. Mooney, a beautiful hand-painted plaque from Miss Carrie Mooney, a dozen fine linen napkins, Mr. and Mrs. Nanford Smith, a beautiful silver fruit basket from E.L. Pelsar, half-dozen silver soup spoons for Mr. and Mrs. Ben Silver, handsome solid silver butter knife and spoon. Boy, things have changed. What we do here is sell stories, and it's always fascinating to me what the story of this building is. I think that's a pretty good little amount of history for now. And who's next?
Yeah.
Mr. Sterling.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, everybody. I'm not usually mic'd up. I don't usually need a mic, but it broadcasts a little bit further out in the store. At any rate, that's Catherine, and that picture was probably taken, I don't know, probably maybe 20 years ago, something like that. It was such an honor to be married to her, and we had a long courtship for about 9 or 10 years, and we were married for about 20 years. And so she was reserved and shy. A friend of mine the other day came up to me and said he was sitting in the upstairs when it used to be part of the restaurant out where the travel books are. And he had always wanted to meet Catherine, and suddenly the bookcase opened and Catherine appeared. This is before she died, of course. Well, that would have made a really great story. And he had never met her before, and she suddenly appeared out of really, literally, almost nowhere. Because there's a secret room upstairs that you access through bookshelves up there. and that gets you in where sort of part of the mechanical is and stuff. And and they had a little conversation, and she said a couple of things to him, and he was kind of smitten and never quite forgot that. She moved to Aspen with her 3 daughters in 1973, and she was a writer. As a matter of fact, I will quote from one thing that she wrote called "The Gold Shoes: Growing Up with Books," and this was in the newsletter for Explore in 1991. And so there's a snowy day of the bookstore, and you can see how similar it looks now. That was probably taken about 25 years ago. And each time a book would be bought, she would go into mourning because she didn't like parting with the book. And yet, and I didn't know her at this point, and I was a customer of the bookstore. I mean, I had been a borrower of books most of my life, and when I met Catherine, I became a buyer of books. In her house, there were lots of books, but there weren't really readers after her father had died. Her mother wasn't a great reader, and but they had decorated the house with books. So before she could read, she would take those books down and act like she was reading them. And her brother would come along and say, "You stupid fool, you've got the book upside down. You don't know anything." He was about 6 years older than I, and he was a practical joker. He was Irving Thalberg Jr., the so-called heir apparent, but he became a great philosopher in America who wrote many, many books and articles. And his was the philosophy of ethics, and he was really a leader in his field. So as Catherine, when she learned to read, that was it. That made her whole life. And it wasn't like she was ignored in the family. They just didn't always pay that much attention to her, so she did nothing but read. Then she found the library, but the librarian wasn't very friendly to children. And so she went first to Beverly Hills to Marion Hunter's bookstore. And I'm going to read from this one thing that she said there. Marion Hunter's was a cozy jumble of what I assumed were all the books in the world. And the children's books had their own upstairs mezzanine. This seemed to me to be a terribly private and special place, and I was often in those days the only one upstairs for hours. So no one bothered me or told me what I should or shouldn't like to read. It was a very serious business selecting my books, and I needed my head about me to do it right. It required a certain deep sampling, but not enough to spoil the heady thrill of opening a new, virginal book unread by anyone else and plunging into its story, following wherever the author might lead, a willing captive, a stowaway. Whatever I read, it seemed at that moment totally wonderful, for I had not learned to be a critic, nor would it ever have occurred to me in those days to abandon ship midway and leave a book unfinished. She also attended, she didn't graduate from Vassar, she attended Vassar, University of Utah, Stanford, and graduated from UCLA. And she did graduate work at USC. She was a creative writer, as I mentioned, never published. She was a lifelong skier, learned to ski at age 3 at Sun Valley. Hollywood just moved to Sun Valley in the wintertime. She taught consciousness-raising groups here because she was a radical feminist. And at her memorial service, I think probably 20 women came up to me and said they had been in her groups, and it changed their lives. So she had a way of affecting people, and I was a customer at her first store, and I found her so bright, and she was a perfectionist, she was utterly beautiful, and she had an agile mind, she really did. And one of the things that was really interesting is, you note the name. It's a verb. It's not a noun. So many people think it's a noun. But what she wanted, which is what reading is all about, was a verb. And so I always thought that was a wonderful thing that she chose that as the way of getting the bookstore started. And it started in 1973 in this Victorian. And that was the little area that Margaret was describing where she sat down with Catherine in the front, sort of a Victorian love seat in the book. And that's my youngest stepdaughter, Devlin. She's the only one of the 3 girls who went into the film industry. These are people that have worked at the store. The guy on the right was a bookkeeper, and this woman was a bookseller. This is David, who's now moved back to Aspen, married to a long time other Aspenite. Robert on the left was the assistant manager of the store. He used to run a bookstore over in Vail. Carol, still around town. She was a wonderful bookseller. And the woman in the middle was the manager of the bookstore for a while, and each of the women on the sides were other workers here. Steve on the right works at the Pitkin County Library, and the evil-looking guy on the left was a brilliant bookseller. The guy on the right used to be the assistant director of the store as well too, and the woman in the middle is that Rini in the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another nice shot of Catherine. And there's Miss Sirkin, who wrote a book, a children's book, and she is reading it to the kids there. She spends every summer here. She's from Florida. There's Ivan Doig. He wrote a wonderful trilogy. He's a wonderful Western writer. English Creek, Ride Mariah Ride, and Dancing at the Rascal Fair were part of his trilogy. And I have read all those, and he writes about Montana, and there's a younger version of me there. This is Dick Farson, who was a big force in the design conference, and a very, very well-known local woman who was a county commissioner. And there's a Nobel Prize winner right there, Murray Gell-Mann.
Oh, yeah.
Who's the one who created the word quark. We didn't create the word quark. It came out of the great Irish writer Finnegan's Wake, I think it came out of. But he pulled that out and used that as that term that became universal in the world of physics. So those of you who are newcomers and haven't been to the Aspen Center for Physics, that last year had 3 or 4 Nobel Prize winners. He's now in his 90s. He's a brilliant guy, and he loved Explorer Booksellers. There's Catherine with Elaine Pagels, the Gnostic Gospels, and many other books that she's written. She teaches theology and religion in Princeton. She's here this summer and usually writes a book almost every summer. I've introduced her probably a dozen times. One of our most famous Aspenites, that's Mortimer Adler, who used to do all the seminars for the Aspen Institute, and he wrote a book called 6 Great Ideas, and one of his good friends here chastised him one day and said, "What did you write a book about 6th grade ideas, Mortimer? What, you slipped?" And he said, "Excuse me, dear, it's 6 great ideas." And to see, there's if anybody read the books that are done by a writer called Judith Michael? Well, there's Michael on the right and Judith on the left with the sunglasses. And that's one of our greatest, they're still living here, they're part-time in Chicago. This may be one of Aspen's greatest writers. His name is James Salter, Jim Salter. He doesn't have an enormous body, he didn't have an enormous body of work, but the books that he wrote were so beautifully written, and he died at age 90 last year, and the last novel he wrote, 87 years old I think he was when he published that writing. Right? And so it was wonderful having him in town all the time. All That Is was the last book he wrote. There he is with his wife, Kay Eldridge, who's also a writer. And there's Franz Berko, who is a great photographer, and he helped invent color film in the photography world. He died about 15 years ago. He was a real force in town. And there's Chris Rainier, who's a well-known photographer with National Geographic, and he was doing a big sign there. And there's Bunny Ryerson, the daughter of that other woman I mentioned earlier. And there's Michael Lewis on his first book, Liar's Poker. And you know, he's probably one of the hottest writers out there. We had, I think, 4 people come to the book signing. And so I loved introducing people. You never know, it's a crapshoot when you have a book signing. You just don't know who the hell's going to come or how many are going to come. Like today, we didn't know if anybody would come. So it's nice to see so many people here that were interested enough to come and learn about the bookstore. One time at one of Sam Wiley's book signings, he wrote a lot of books. And I said, "Sam, how when you read so much and you write books, could you be so damn conservative?" And he said, "Bill, he's some doubts." He said, "Bill, reading will lead you anywhere." I said, "You know what? You're right." And I was wrong. I mean, he was really right about that. Reading books vicariously can take you anywhere in the world, and you can learn anything in books. I think what would be really fun would be for Mark to talk a little bit about the evolution of the store, what it's like to live here, what it was like to work for Captain Goldberg.
I arrived in Aspen, Colorado in 1999 after banging around on the coastal mountains in Northern California for about 20 years in the Mendocino and Eureka, Arcata area. I loved it up there, it was great. But when I was up there, I met this beautiful red-haired whitewater kayak instructor, and she lived in Aspen.
Everybody's falling in love with your instructor.
Yeah. So, well, I was cooking. So I was cooking in this, it was a world-renowned adventure lodge, really. I got here, I was pounding the pavement, I was doing all the things. My heart really wasn't in it. I cooked for 25 years, every situation you can imagine, and I just wasn't feeling like cooking. So then I walked by this beautiful brown and white Victorian, and on the front door there's a little sign that says "Bookseller Wanted." And as any normal human being would do, I said, "I love books. I can sell books. That sounds like a great job." And it was, and it is. And there's no nice way to say this, but Catherine was a terror to contractors. She really was. To her, a blueprint was just the merest of suggestions. She was the queen of the change order, and trust me, I worked with all those guys trying to get them to do different things. Yes. I can't tell you how many times I saw big, beefy, tough builders wandering out of the building, mumbling quietly to themselves, totally perplexed as to what they would do next. It was about this time that Catherine fired me for taking too long of a vacation. My partner, now wife, same redhead, Denise, and I had planned 3 weeks of travel and whitewater kayaking in the jungles of Ecuador. I remember being a little perturbed because although Catherine didn't say no to my vacation plans, she never really said yes either. What she said was, "Go ahead and do it." I've heard that before. I knew that something was wrong when I got home, and I had a message from Catherine that said something like, "Call me before you think you might be coming back to work." As it turned out, I wasn't. Happy Thanksgiving. Instead, I would spend a couple of weeks working temp services, helping gut the building that would become Aspen's new Prada store. There's some irony. Fortunately for me, Catherine was willing to consider hiring me back after some serious negotiation, and with a little bit of bowing and scraping thrown in for good measure, she agreed to hire me back as long as I agreed to become a full-time employee. We lost Catherine in January of 2006, 10 years ago, and it was a sad and traumatic event for all of us. After that, Catherine's daughters took over the operation of Explorer, albeit remotely, as they had demanding, important, and extensive responsibilities of their own. They asked Catherine's accountant and friend, Vicki Garwood, to be the on-site manager and supervisor. This is from Catherine's daughters to the Wileys. It says, "Nothing would make my mother happier than knowing that you have stepped forward to ensure that the favorite bookstore of her adulthood will not close its doors as did the favorite bookstore of her childhood. And to know that children and adults can, for years to come, still find the magic she described in the first bookstore she ever saw, a private and special place, a cozy jumble of what I assumed were all the books in the world." Last year, as you all know, we were acquired by a partnership of nonprofit organizations. We were delighted, of course, and are looking forward to a long and rewarding relationship with these wonderful folks. And on that note, I would like to introduce Ann Towers, the representative.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's so heartwarming to see so many people interested in and passionate about the bookstore. And we bought the bookstore because we love the bookstore. We love it just the way it is. We love its wonderful history, and we want to nurture and sustain that. And one of the things we believe very deeply is that independent bookstores in this day and age will survive only because people not only love books, but love the physical experience of coming into the bookstore. Please let me or Ellie know anytime if you would like us to pursue somebody or would like to help us identify and recruit somebody to come into the store. And that's what we plan for the future of this bookstore, and I think it is the future for many independent bookstores going forward. A lot of them are now thriving, and we intend to make sure this is one of the stars. So, thank you.